My name is Amy Riolo, and we're making French pain au lait. Right now, we're going to make our dough and knead it. So the next step in making our dough is to add the remainder of the 3/4 cup of milk into our yeast and milk mixture, which we started from before. And we're just going to whisk those together. You can see that the yeast has dissolved and that the milk is nice and foamy. That means that the yeast is working. If you ever put yeast in with liquid and it doesn't foam, then that means that it's not working. That's what proofing the yeast is all about. So if your yeast isn't foaming, it's not working, it's no good. You want to go to the store, make sure you check the expiration date, and buy good yeast. And now we're going to add the rest of our ingredients into the standing mixer. And what I have here is 2 cups of bread flour. I'm going to add that in. Next, we'll add 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Then we're going to add our 2 teaspoons of salt, our teaspoon of sugar, and we'll slowly stir these together on a low speed. And this will start to resemble a coarse meal. And then we can add in our 1/4 cup of unsalted butter. The reason why we're working with unsalted butter is because whenever you bake, especially if you're baking European pastries, it's always good to work with unsalted butter. Unsalted butter allows you to control the amount of salt that you want in a recipe. And since baking has a lot of chemical proportions in it, it's really important to make sure that we get the right mix. And when our dough is done mixing, it's going to be almost a ball so that we know we can go ahead and start working with it. Just going to move our bowls over to the side. And our dough is ready, so we can stop our mixer. And then I'm going to flour our work surface. When you make bread, you can notice that a lot of different recipes will always tell you to flour your work surface. And you don't want to go overboard. You always want to leave a little space in the center because you might not need the flour. It's much better to use less flour than you need than to use too much. Because if you use too much flour, your bread is going to be tough. But you always want a little bit just to make it hold together and to give you the nice shape. But if you had to err, it's always better to err on the side of having too little flour. So now our dough is ready, and we're just turning it out. Now we can grab it all together and make a nice little ball. And if you've noticed, we've used a combination of all-purpose flour and bread flour. Bread flour is great in making recipes because it has a higher protein content. And what that means is when the protein mixes with the water or any liquid that you have in your bread recipe, that creates gluten. And the gluten is what gives dough its elasticity. And when dough is more elastic, it's more springy, it's light, and it tastes better. So it's always best, if you can, to use a little bit of bread flour or all bread flour in with your recipes. You want to get a nice mix of elasticity and springiness and just a traditional dough flavor. So now we're going to knead the dough. And the first thing we do is we have to make a ball, which is what we have here. We'll put a little bit of flour right on the bottom of where we're working, and then we'll start to knead. The kneading technique is to take the palms of your hands. This is the palm of your hand where it meets your wrist, and you want to flour them a little bit, and then flour the top of your bread, because what we're going to do is push down, push back away from you, and then grab the dough back in. It's very simple. Just push back away from you, and then pull the dough back in. So you push back, pull away. It's a rocking motion. Every time you do that, you're going to turn the dough a 1/4 turn to your left, so counterclockwise. So you start out, you push it back and forth, and then you turn it. We're going to do the same thing again. So we'll go back and forth and turn, back and forth and turn. And you keep doing that, and after you do it a few times, you can really get the hang of it, and it becomes almost second nature, and you just do it over and over again. This is a great workout for your upper body, and it really makes the dough be elastic. Now, you can put a dough hook in your KitchenAid and let the KitchenAid do your work for you, but I think that it's really nice to get your hands into the dough because you can feel what's going on, and you'll know exactly how much kneading it needs. Most doughs, as a standard, need about 8 to 10 minutes of kneading. That's really going to get that gluten working, it's going to get the yeast evenly distributed, and it's going to make sure that you have a nice, light bread. If you ever have bread that's kind of too heavy than it should be, that's because it probably wasn't kneaded long enough. So we're going to keep pushing back, pulling it back towards us, and turning it quarter. And we'll do this for about 10 more minutes until the dough is nice and elastic and springy. So after we've finished kneading our dough for 10 minutes, it should be nice and smooth and elastic. And we're going to form it into a ball and place it into a large bowl, which we have oiled with a tablespoon of oil. We're going to turn the dough to coat it and make sure that it gets covered with oil. Then we're going to place a piece of plastic wrap, which has also been oiled, on top of the bowl and cover it. And we're going to set it aside for 2 hours and let it rise until it's double in volume.